Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're untangling the incredibly chaotic morning of July 18, 2026, at Delhi's Jantar Mantar. Picture this, a morning where human chains of desperate students literally clashed with plainclothes police officers, and the tension in the air was just absolute.
So, the question that's been absolutely dominating headlines across the country is this. Why on earth was a prominent activist suddenly whisked away by police in an ambulance right in the middle of massive youth protests? To understand how this standoff reached such a boiling point and what it tells us about the current state of youth mobilization in India, we really need to look at exactly who the police were there to remove.
The staggering severity of this whole situation really comes down to one number, 21. That's 21 days. Veteran environmentalist, engineer, and education reformer Sonam Wangchuk was on day 21 of an indefinite hunger strike right before his sudden removal. For 3 full weeks, he'd been fasting in the blistering Delhi heat alongside thousands of young students. You have to wonder, what pushes a widely respected figure to take such extreme measures?
Section 1. Sparks of the protest. How did we get here? Well, the first spark was entirely systemic. It all started with an alleged paper leak affecting the 2026 NEET UG medical entrance exam, and that was compounded by major irregularities in the CBSE grading process. If you've ever relied on a standardized test to determine your future, you can totally imagine the panic here. Thousands of students felt like the very systems meant to evaluate them fairly had just completely broken down, leaving them absolutely desperate for accountability. Then came the second spark. And this wasn't an exam. It was a very public, highly controversial statement. In May 2026, during a Supreme Court hearing, Chief Justice Surya Kent remarked, "There are youngsters like cockroaches, parasites of society who attack the system." This one insult literally gave birth to the name of the massive movement we're looking at today. Now, to be completely objective, we have to look at the full picture here. The Chief Justice later came out and clarified that he was completely misquoted. He stated he was specifically criticizing individuals who had entered professional fields using fake academic credentials, and that he definitely wasn't calling the youth at large cockroaches.
Section 2. The Cockroach Janta Party. From digital satire to physical protest.
Despite that clarification, the anger was already out there. Digital communication strategist Abhijit Dipke basically embraced the insult and founded the satirical Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP. But here's the crazy part. It quickly transitioned from this online joke into a highly organized policy movement. They laid out a manifesto with highly specific demands: the immediate resignation of the union education minister, compensation of 10,000 rupees for affected students, and sweeping systemic changes to the public examination system. It's a fascinating example of how modern digital frustration can just pivot straight into concrete political demands. And this movement didn't stay isolated to social media for long. It spread like wildfire into a genuine nationwide agitation. On June 6th, they held their very first street protest at Jantar Mantar. Within just a few weeks, they'd launched a national movement across Pune, Jaipur, Lucknow, Amritsar, and Bengaluru. Then, they brought all that momentum right back to Delhi on June 20th for a massive sit-in. You had youth banging plates and spoons to demand government accountability, which just goes to show how quickly localized grievances can scale up into a national outcry.
Section 3. The Hunger Strikes. Escalation at Jantar Mantar.
At this point, the dynamics of the protest shifted drastically. We're talking an escalation from a youth-led satirical protest into a really high-stakes standoff. Following those initial demonstrations, veteran activist Sonam Wangchuk arrived on June 28th and immediately began an indefinite fast alongside several student organization leaders. This super intense period finally culminated on July 18th, when Wangchuk was forcefully transferred to a hospital. To really ground this in reality, we have to talk about the grave medical facts. 9.1 kilograms. That is the massive amount of body weight Wangchuk had lost by July 17th. His doctors noted severe muscle loss and clinical dehydration, and video footage showed him completely unable to even stand unaided. The physical toll of this protest had simply reached a critical threshold. Section 4. The Current Standoff. A Collision of Narratives. So that chaotic morning of July 18th actually produced two completely conflicting narratives, and we need to look at both sides objectively here. On one side, you have the Delhi police and Safdarjung Hospital stating the transfer was, well, actually, they called it a life-saving medical necessity.
They acted in strict compliance with high court orders because Wangchuk's potassium levels were dangerously dropping to 2.9. But on the flip side, protesters and Wangchuk's family alleged it was a forced abduction by plainclothes officers. They're demanding independent blood testing and utterly refusing medical consent without full transparency.
As you might expect, the police action immediately backfired. It triggered even further escalation. CJP founder Abhijit Dipke instantly started his own indefinite hunger strike, while other student activists just continued their fasts. The environment grew so volatile that an unidentified woman actually threw ink at Dipke during a public address. All the while, various opposition leaders were publicly condemning the government's approach. It's a classic example of how forceful crowd control can sometimes basically pour gasoline on a smoldering fire.
Section 5. The looming Parliament March. What happens next?
All eyes are now firmly locked on this crucial collision looming for July 20th. The CJP remains completely unyielding. They're calling for a peaceful Chalo Sansad march to Parliament to demand examination reforms, insisting the movement will proceed as planned and that the youth will show up in massive numbers. However, the harsh security reality is that they have absolutely zero official police clearance. There are strict prohibitory orders in place for the Parliament's monsoon session, which creates a massive, highly volatile risk of mass detentions if the students actually proceed.
Which brings us to the absolute heart of the issue. What actually happens when a satirical youth movement collides head-on with harsh systemic realities? As India's education reforms hang in the balance, we're left to wonder, will this totally unprecedented agitation force the structural changes millions of students are demanding? Or will it be permanently silenced by the heavy hand of security protocols?